Chargers rookies are reporting to training camp today, and there are going to be several who are asked to have big roles for this team in 2022. So, we're going to talk about how they're going to have to earn it and which rookies that the Chargers drafted could potentially miss the cut.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier. We've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons now, but we're headed into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free every day on all platforms. And David, training camp is somewhat here, and we will take it because it's the off season, and it means that we're going to have some content coming out of the training camp and seeing how some of these rookies are going to fare. And today we are focusing on the rookies the Chargers drafted and which of them could be starters right away. Who is actually fighting for a starting job in training camp right now? It's looking like Zion Johnson has it and has a big step towards already winning that job as we see it. But there's several guys like JT Woods and Isaiah Spiller who could be asked for early playing time potentially, but it's going to depend on how they perform at this training camp because this is the most important time of their rookie season, and they're going to have to go out there and earn it. And it's the same thing with guys like Tito Ogbonnia, while the later round guys are just fighting for a roster spot, because if you're picked in the late 6th or the 7th round, you're going to be fighting for a roster spot, and there's a few guys in the Chargers, Jazir Taylor, Zander, Horvath, that are going to have to put it together in training camp if they want to make this team coming up, which is a good thing for the Chargers. But when you're talking about starters, David, I think Zion Johnson is truly the only player competing, I put air quotes next to that, to be a starter to start the season.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this roster, and we've talked about it all throughout the offseason. It's just one of those rosters that just does not have a lot of holes. There's not a lot of starting spots that are up for grabs, but Zion Johnson is playing a position that there is no incumbent starter other than more than likely himself. So, yes, he is in prime position to step right out of college and step right into the pros and start right away, and that does not happen very often. But in his case, I think you can look at this roster, Daniel, and you can feel pretty comfortable saying that he is the best option to play right guard for the Chargers starting this 2022 season.
Well, and he's just the only guy where it's like he is so obviously the best option. The best case scenario for the Chargers is he goes out there and he's starting for you week 1 at right guard. And what it also represents is the biggest addition to the Chargers offensive line, something that obviously took a major step in its rebuild last year with the money invested in guys like Corey Linsley and Matt Filer, and also investing in a first-round pick on Rashawn Slater. But the Chargers did it in back-to-back years, picking Zion Johnson this year in the first round, and you get picked with that pick to come in and to be a starter right away. But I think the other thing is, too, Chargers are just in a better position than they were last year, because last year, you were expecting 2 dudes to come in and start for you right away, and both did an admirable job, and one was an all-pro and Rashawn Slater. Yeah. But like even Asante Samuel Jr., you knew he was going to have to start for you. You didn't have any other options really. This year, you're really only relying on one, and they really needed it to work out, David, because he's so far and clearly above any other player that they could have man that position for them right now, that as much as he needs to put it together in training camp so he's ready week 1, the Chargers need him to be ready for week 1 as well, because he's going to go out there and be protecting instantly one of the most valuable assets in the entire NFL in Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and if you're thinking to yourself, what makes this guy qualified to be able to go step in here and protect Justin Herbert? Well, allow me to give you a little refresher course on Zion Johnson here. He graduated with a degree in computer science. So he is incredibly intelligent. Another guy that's just incredibly intelligent.
And Boston College is just a really, really tough school. But yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, hey, he just joins Rashawn Slater, another guy coming from Northwestern, just 2 ridiculously, prestigious educational institutions. Also a 2-time captain. He's incredibly smart, like I mentioned. And oh, by the way, he's not just smart, but he's durable too. He didn't miss a game. He played 58 straight games. He is fantastic. He logged double-digit starts at multiple positions on the offensive line. He's incredibly versatile. Oh, and by the way, he only gave up 3 sacks in 3 years. So this dude is technically proficient. He is an animal as a run blocker. He road grades people. He annihilates people. He runs through them. He has an incredibly strong base, and he is a fantastic pass protector. He is one of the cleanest, one of the safest picks of the 2022 draft as far as we saw it, and I think he is very much equipped to step in and play very good football right away.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, his story plays a part into that too, because the man started out at Davidson, not scholarship, right? And he was weighing 225 pounds, and he turned into
225.
the 320-pound behemoth that he is
Monster.
now, built like a brick house. And like the thing about that is, obviously, it's 2 different situations, but we saw him go from Davidson and then move into a big conference like the ACC and still be successful and one of the best offensive linemen in the country, and he took it in stride. He was able to adjust his body. He was able to adjust his play. They started playing him at tackle, and then he had to move to guard and still was one of the best offensive linemen in the country. And it just shows you what this dude has been able to do, and that he has consistently his entire career continued to get better and better, which is exactly what you have to do when you're stepping up to the NFL level. But another guy, David, then I think doesn't fit into the starter list, obviously, but a guy that we expect to get instant playing time, who I expect to get snaps in week 1, is Isaiah Spiller. And obviously part of that is just the easiest path to playing time, because he's competing with Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree, and 2 undrafted free agent rookies. This is a position where the Chargers need a boost, right? They spent a 4th-round pick on Isaiah Spiller to be that boost, to be that RB2. And I think out of all of the rest of the guys on this list, he easily has the easiest path to playing time.
Right. I mean, because when you look at the other names, that played running back for the Chargers last year, not named Austin Eckler, they didn't really do anything. Unfortunately for Larry Roundtree and Josh Kelly, they averaged a little over 2 yards a carry. They just were not productive. And the thing is the Chargers offense was kind of pigeonholed a little bit, because when Austin Eckler comes off the football field, you kind of know what's going to happen. They're going to throw the football a lot, because they couldn't really trust the other guys to tote the rock and get productive yards to allow Austin Eckler to get those blows. Now enter in Isaiah Spiller, a guy who's coming from the SEC, another SEC running back, but a guy who has fantastic vision, has very good contact balance. He does an excellent job at running in between the tackles, and he was a leader for that Texas A&M team as well. So he has the right pedigree. His father played professional sports as well. So, he's a fan, he's a fantastic running back, a rookie, has a fresh body. So he's going to be coming in here, and he does probably have the best opportunity to come in here and, get 5 to 10 possible touches a game to try to spell Austin Eckler and keep Austin Eckler more fresh throughout the season.
Yeah. The thing about that situation is just, it's unsustainable to continue to give Austin Eckler that usage rate, just really for any running back. And I mean, it's just asking for disaster, right? It's just, you shouldn't have to rely on that. And it wasn't just them not being able to run the ball well last year. It was the guys behind Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson less so, but like missing in pass protection and things like that. And that's one of the reasons I think Isaiah Spiller specifically can come in and play right away. Is that's one of the biggest things you have to do. And at least as far as a college running back goes, I thought he was really, really good at that. I mean, obviously still missed some assignments here and there, but pass protecting running backs in college is like one of the worst things out there. Like, none of them can usually do it coming out. And he's a dude.
And they're not really asking them to do that either. So they don't get a lot of experience
getting asked to do it against Alabama and Georgia linebackers, right? Like the toughest dudes that you're going to come across.
NFL factories.
Sure. And he's on a very good pass catcher as well. So he has a very well-rounded game. He has excellent vision. And I think he gets, because if you did not test well athletically, that's the biggest red flag here. Just because when you compare him against guys who usually do well coming out of the draft, they usually test better than Isaiah Spiller did. But he's also still a dude that, let's not forget, had 1,286 yards after contact the last 2 seasons, according to PFF, and also forced 100 missed tackles over the last 2 years. So I think he has more wiggle than a lot of people give him credit for, but that's the biggest red flag. And I still think
some people don't test well, Daniel. Some people just don't test well. Some people just don't fit well. Yeah, I definitely was horrible. I mean, especially as
he's the one that has the degree.
Yeah, I mean, I have a degree for sure, but thank God I didn't have to do a lot of math. But For
Sure.
Isaiah Spiller, he's not going to have to do a lot of math either. He's just going to have to show up in pads and do what he does. And I think that his physical nature is going to help him at the NFL level.
And the thing is, too, they don't need him to be Alvin Kamara, right? They don't need him to be Austin Eckler. They just need him to be a guy who can come in and do enough and
Which is
not
Isaiah Spiller, baby.
make it a little bit less of a drop off when you go to Austin Eckler, to whoever that next guy is, and to stay on the field, because obviously Justin Jackson was good in the RB2 role, but just could not stay healthy. So that's the most important thing. But I think another guy that just missed this part of the show was JT Woods, because he's another guy where I can see the path for him at playing time. But this is going to be the most important, toughest part of his season as far as trying to get on the field, because this is where he's going to have to show that he can tackle a lot better than he did at college, because he has the traits and the takeaway ability to get on the field early on. So we're going to talk about him and a couple other guys fighting for a rotational role coming up after this. But it's going to be tough for any of these guys, especially defensively with all the additions, to find a way to find snaps on this Chargers team. But all of us have been in a tough spot at one time or another. And I can tell you I definitely was, because I just got done with my bachelor party. So things were a little tough. And I used the Dave app. And I would suggest it to anyone out there who finds himself in a tough time. You need some money to buy me a wedding present. You need a couple of dollars for gas. Dave is the perfect place to go, because we've all been in that situation. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when those unexpected expenses come up. Something goes wrong with your car, something goes wrong with your tooth. We've all been there, and Dave is the place that you go to help you out of that situation. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, more money to buy me a wedding present, and you can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out every day without the hangups, because there's no interest and there's no credit check needed. And millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief that they need with extra cash. So make sure you guys download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for the extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For the terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Thank God I survived the bachelor party, because that would have been rough, David, trying to do this all by himself. But yes, no, it was barely, and it was an incredible time. But happy to be back here with you guys. Thank you for your understanding that we weren't here yesterday for that show, but we should be here the rest of the week for you guys. More great content, roster battles, what undrafted free agents we like to potentially make the team, and much more. But make sure you guys are checking out the big thing Locked On has going on right now, because the NFL stars who are worth the most betting-wise are being broken down by Locked On NFL. Starting yesterday, they're giving you the top 50 most valuable players in the NFL from an odds maker's perspective. Available July 18th. So right now from Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast from. But JT Woods, David, is the guy who's a little bit of a wild card, because he doesn't have as easy of a path to playing time as someone like Isaiah Spiller. But I do think he finds himself going into training camp with a very good opportunity to carve out a role for this Chargers defense, because he has takeaway ability. He has the speed that they really desperately kind of needed last year, and that showed up in a bad way too many times. But there's some things that he has to correct, and it starts with his tackling, because he can do anything he wants through the rookie camp, and he did miss some time waiting to sign that contract. But now is the first chance he gets to tackle somebody. And for me, David, that was just the one big hang up with this guy when I was watching his film.
Yeah, I mean, besides the tackling issue, I mean, he's long, he's tall, he's fast. He's 6'2", 190, and ran a 4.36. So, I mean, when you look at those things right there, you're like, yes. I like all of that. That's going to play.
Led college football and takeaway and interceptions too, which is nice.
Yeah, 12 passes defense, 9 interceptions, and we can't forget the best nickname in all of college sports, the Heartbreak Kid. Come on, man. You have to bring it up every single time because it is that good. But yes, for JT Woods, he doesn't have a crystal clear path to playing time, but the guy who played backup free safety for them last year, which was Alohi Gilman, I think we all saw a lot to be desired from Alohi Gilman's play. And I think if you take JT Woods and you put him back there, you feel comfortable with his range, you feel comfortable with his ball skills, but he has to come into training camp and show everyone, most importantly the coaches, that he has improved on that tackling, because hey, they're not going to throw the ball every time. You got to be able to come up and run support and be able to put a hit on these running backs and get them on the ground. And he has to be more sure, be a more sure tackler. He's got to get these guys on the wrap. He's got to wrap up and he's got to stop launching. That's kind of one of the things that we saw from his tape. Wrap up a little bit more consistently, and then you could see yourself on the field quite a bit for the Chargers this year.
And the reason being because Derwin James, they like to move him around a lot.
Yeah.
So even though this could technically be a safety 3, as we see it right now, what he's trying to fight for, it's really a sub-package role where he could be that 6th defensive back on the field or something along those lines, right? And that's where somebody's going to get that playing time, and he's going to be battling it out with Alohi Gilman, who could be on the roster bubble, and Mark Webb, who could be on the roster bubble, depending on how that breaks out, right? Because Staley did say that Mark Webb, they thought he was going to have significant playing time last year before he ended up getting hurt, and that kind of derailed everything. But JT Woods is a guy that it's like, you want to get him on the field, but you're not going to be able to do it unless you see enough from him in training camp and in the preseason as far as him being that physical force, because he is the last line of defense on certain plays. If he's out there playing that specific spot, you need him to be able to come through and make that tackle. But as far as the trigger, wanting to get downhill, he has the want to do it. I don't think it's an ability thing at all with his tackling. I think it's just more of a technique thing, and I think he can be taught because the athleticism, the willingness to hit is there, which is obviously the most important thing, because you don't want somebody who wants to shy away from that contact, not at this level. But there's a couple other guys, David, I think that are vying for roles on this team as rookies that the Chargers drafted. And the next one's Tito Abonia, who the biggest thing against him right now is just such a crowded room where it's like, I'm not even 100% how this room's going to play out yet. We're going to break it down for you probably later this week. But you're talking about a Tito, Braden Fehoko, Christian Covington, Morgan Fox, Jerry Tillery, Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson. That's 7 dudes right now.
Joe Gaziano.
Yeah, I mean, that's 7 right there before you even say anyone else, right? And I don't know if the Chargers are going to keep more than 6. So it's already going to be tough. And as a 5th round pick, I think he has a leg up as far as making the team. And with defensive linemen, those dudes rotate. Even the best defensive tackles like that, you're not playing 100% of the snaps for a game. So, like, he could be in a reserve role, David, and he's going to have to earn it because there's some guys in there who are going to be hungry just to fight for that roster spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tito Abonia coming out of UCLA, I mean, he is a house. He's 6'4", 326 pounds, so he is gigantic. He has a very large and powerful frame. I mean, he's a very, very strong guy. He's a guy that he's going to come in and try to eat up double teams. That's, basically what, his calling card, what his bread and butter is going to be at the next level. The only thing for him is he's just not a very quick guy. I mean, whenever you're that big, it's kind of hard to have that quick twitch. And he's not a very good pass rusher at all. So he's going to be a guy that's going to make his money stopping the run. And like I said, eating up those double teams and trying to get penetration that way so he can allow his other defenders and his other linebackers to come in and make plays.
Yeah, and I mean, with what Brandon Staley wants his defensive lineman to do, being long is a super big part of that, and being able to just stand up, be able to shed the blocks after, you're trying to get double teamed or something like that, to be able to shed those blocks and be able to make tackles is something he wants you to be able to do in this 1.5 gap system that he kind of is trying to run. And that's what they didn't have last year's guys, enough guys who could do that, right, and play that kind of style. Tito, to me, is more of a project. I think it's going to be hard for him to get significant snaps early on, but obviously this is a dude that is stashed in the 5th round, right, to hopefully make an impact at that position for you later on a cheap contract, right? That's why you go and pick a dude like this.
I'm glad that you got guys like Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson in that room now, guys that can really show him how to play the run at the NFL level, that have NFL experience getting that stuff done.
I think it's more important that they have just the experience in Brandon Staley's defense, because as we saw last year, I mean, just getting the guys to be lined up and be covering the same gaps that they're supposed to be is not a given, right? That's something you have to learn. So I think from a mental perspective, it's even better because Morgan Fox has played in it too. Sebastian Joseph Day. Those guys obviously know what is expected from them on the defensive line. And I think as far as him specifically, and just I think the general problem at defensive tackle, like these are good problems to have. Like if you're having a hard time because all these dudes are playing well, that's a much different situation than they were in 2021. But the last guy here is Jamari Sawyer, who I think, even though a backup offensive lineman doesn't play like a backup defensive tackle, right? You're not rotating in your right guard and left guard. But I think what Jamari Sawyer is fighting for is that next guard up. Right out of this situation, because we know Matt Filer and Zion Johnson, as we see it right now, are going to be the starters more than likely. Matt Filer obviously is going to be a starter, but Zion Johnson is going to be too. So with those guys, you're trying to, as always, as we've talked about on the show many times, avoid a Senio Kelemete situation, right? And that's why Jamari Sawyer is really, truly fighting for a very important spot on this Chargers team, because we saw what happened when they had to go to the backups in the interior offensive line. And the way I see it right now is it's probably him, Brendan Hymus, and Will Clapp, who is a guy who's a backup center and also has guard flexibility, and is also the only guy that's actually played with Brendan Nugent on the Chargers offensive line, their new offensive line coach who replaced Frank Smith. So as we saw last year, I mean, usually if you don't hear about your backup guard, that's a good thing. But when you have a guy like this who has his pedigree, who dropped for whatever reasons in the draft, but was the starting left tackle for the national championship Georgia Bulldogs last year.
Who gave up one pressure, by the way.
Gave up one pressure last season. I mean, that's not a bad guy to have in that roster, right? In that bullpen coming off the bench. And we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, that was in the national title game, just to be clear. Yeah.
Yeah, that would, if it was for the season, I don't think he's probably going in the 6th round. But like, this dude has game, and I think he'll be a valuable asset that's going to come in handy at some point. Maybe
makes your depth look way better, that's for sure.
Well, of course, but it's going to be interesting because they weren't ready to rush Brendan Hymus last year. That's another battle that we're going to talk about, where it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what his development has been like, because they obviously weren't ready to put him on last year, but not everyone goes on the same path to training and to getting on the field. But better to be in that situation than to be literally fighting for your life and fighting for a roster spot, which on the next segment, we're getting into the guys. Any one of the three of them could not make this 53-man roster, and two of them are probably competing with each other. So we're going to get into that. But one thing that's never a hard decision, like maybe Jazeer Taylor and Deane Leonard, is picking what kind of protein bar you want, because there's only one option. It's Built Bar. And right now, it's the coconut chocolate brownie puff that you have to be checking out, because it is coconut brownie chunk. It was already one of the best Built Bar regular protein bars that was out there. Now they're making it into puffs. It's lighter. It's even better now than it once was. And right now they are selling it for a limited time at built.com. You guys definitely have to check it out, because you could be eating, the chalky, waxy protein bars that you probably have been eating, or you can upgrade your protein bar game and get something that actually feels like a treat. It feels bad when you're eating a little bit, because it's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to have something that tastes this good, but it'll fit on your diet too, because it's low sugar, low carb, high in protein, and high in fiber. So step your protein game up with the coconut brownie chunk puff at Built Bar right now, because that is the best protein bar you're going to find, and they're all 100% covered in chocolate and soft and easy to chew. So stop drawing and listen. They're good for you and they taste great. That's something that's very, very hard to find in the wild, as I've always told you. And for me, if it doesn't taste good, I'm just straight up not going to eat it. So I've loved Built Bars. I've really, they've helped me get through this whole wedding season, right? And I mean, it was one of the only things when I had COVID a couple of weeks ago, that really saved me, just because I needed something that tasted good. And I used Built Bar, and right now they have the best flavor you're going to find. So go to built.com and use the promo code right now, LOCKED15, and you can even save money off your box of Built Bars. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so the guys that we've talked about so far, none of them are guaranteed playing time, probably except for Zion Johnson and Isaiah Spiller, as we see it right now. But these guys, David, aren't really fighting for playing time as much as they're just fighting for their NFL career, which is always a crazy thing. And that's what you have to keep in perspective with a lot of these young guys too. Is like, if it doesn't work out, it might never work out for them. This is the most important time in most of these young dudes' life, especially the late draft picks and undrafted free agents.
Yeah.
And the Chargers are going to have some tough decisions to make, because they took back-to-back corners late in the draft, and the Chargers cornerback room is now much deeper too. It's another position where you can't really just write both of these guys in, because as we see it right now, David, with that, it's J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Michael Davis, Bryce Callahan, Tavon Campbell, and even Kamon Hall, right? Because he at least has been with this team and has a little bit of flexibility too. So he has a leg up in some of those situations. But now it's Deane Leonard, a 7th round pick, and Jazeer Taylor trying to find a way on this team. And both of them are different with their pros and cons. But as we see it right now, David, it almost feels like they are directly taking each other on to fight for a roster spot at the end of this roster.
Yeah, unfortunately, this isn't the Jaguars. I mean, this isn't going to be a spot where you're a late round pick and you're have a good
Dave
chance to
just
make the roster.
sorry, Wig. Dude just took out the Jaguars for no reason.
I
Go
love
ahead.
you, Wig, but let's be real, man. We haven't had the best teams the last several years, but the Chargers actually have a fantastic roster, and
Justin
the
Herbert's hair is better than Trevor Lawrence's. Go ahead.
absolutely.
I mean,
The
that's what I'm about.
defensive back room, the corner room is very full. There's not a lot of elbow room that's going to be in that room. There's not a lot of spots to take. So these two guys, as important as it is going to be to show what they can do on defense, I've said many times and I'll say again, I feel like they're going to have to show their worth on special teams first and foremost for them to make this roster. Whether that's being a gunner, whether that's being just a screaming demon making tackles, that's what they're going to have to do to really show off and show out and be able to show the coaching staff that they belong on this roster. The Chargers had one of the worst special teams units in the league last year and the year before that, so they need to improve that unit. And I think part of the reason for these picks late in the draft was getting guys that have crazy athleticism and speed to try to improve that unit.
Yeah, and both of these guys, I mean, have pretty good speed, right? 4.4 speed, so that's always good. It's
Yeah.
fast enough to play at the NFL level for sure. And yeah, you're looking for traits. And I think the tough thing about this conversation is both guys kind of really bring different things to the table, and they're in two very different situations. Because in the case of, Jazeer Taylor, which for you, I mean, you said you wanted a screaming demon. The dude was literally a demon deacon. So, like, I don't know if that plays a factor in it for you, if he's the leader in your clubhouse.
Maybe.
But I see one in Jazeer Taylor who's maybe more fit for certain parts of special team because he's a guy that at least might get a crack at the return position.
Yep.
His first career kickoff attempt that he ever had was a touchdown. So, I mean, he does have that, but didn't return kicks the last year. But the other thing was he played like 6 seasons at Wake Forest. Like, he got all the extra eligibility due to COVID and all of those things. Whereas Deane Leonard went to college in Canada for a couple of seasons and dominated at the Canadian, college football.
First team
But
all
at the
Canada
same
twice.
time, at the same time though, you only have 2 seasons of him with NCAA experience with him
Right.
at Ole Miss, where he's going up against premier competition. In his first year, he didn't really play as much. So, like, he has one starting year at the SEC level, which is obviously a great thing to see for someone like that and what got him onto the Chargers roster late. And the other thing is, though, is for him specifically, he has better size. He doesn't have as much speed, but I do see him as more of a guy who can play on the outside. And when you have the guys like Asante Samuel Jr. and smaller guys, Bryce Callahan, another guy, I think I would lean towards the guy who could do both. And I'm not sure Jazeer Taylor can do both. And last year also, Jazeer Taylor, supposedly according to Dane Brugler, gave up 5 touchdowns and had 9 penalties. So there's a lot to clean up there. So it's better to have more tape when the tape's not as good or less tape, and more mystery. Because I do think Deane Leonard is more of a project, right, as a prospect. But it's just going to be what they prefer. Like, do they want a guy who can return? Because, obviously they want the special teams value at any late roster spot, but specifically guys at corner who can be gunners and things like that.
Yep.
Or do you go with the guy with Deane Leonard who might be a little bit more toolsy, has more of a frame to probably get to be an outside corner later on, is 6 foot tall and has all those things. Another thing is, David, Jazeer Taylor was taken 22 spots ahead of where Deane Leonard was. So obviously the Chargers had a chance at both of them. And in the 6th round, they took Jazeer Taylor. And in the 7th round, they took Deane Leonard.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously they saw a little bit more out of Jazeer Taylor to take him a little bit earlier, but these guys at the back end of the draft, I mean, you're really just throwing shots in the dark. You're trying to get guys that you see some traits, you see some abilities that you like, that you feel like you can cultivate, that you can teach at the next level. So we'll have to see which one of these two guys takes advantage of their opportunity here in training camp, because this is where it's going to be decided.
For sure. And for what it's worth, Brandon Staley said that Ryan Ficken, the new special teams coordinator, did a lot of work on Jazeer Taylor. So that's definitely, I mean, going by your kind of standards of, hey, you got to play special teams, he has a leg up in that situation. As far as Deane Leonard goes, what he had to say about him, Brandon Staley, that is it, like Mark Webb last year, he has a lot of traits that we feel like translate to the next level. So Mark Webb's obviously the guy we just told you Brandon Staley thought would play significant snaps for the Chargers last year. And It's not a for sure thing that both of them don't make the roster, but like there's literally a chance neither of them make the roster because it's just
Very,
going to
very
be
good chance.
yeah, like it's just going to be a long shot. It's like if Tavon Campbell, who has literally experience in your defense, even if he struggled at times last year, he's going to have a leg up over these dudes who have to learn it all as they're coming in. But I think the fan favorite this year is going to be easy because I think it's going to be Zander Horvath, the
The
fullback
Viking.
for the Chargers. Now, I mean, I don't know if he's a Viking, but he might
He's
be
a
like a
Viking name.
Spartan or something. Like, I mean,
Yes.
the dude play. Okay, well, this is my favorite thing about Zander Horvath. Horvath managed to return to play 8 games his senior season at Purdue, despite suffering a broken fibula in the second game of the season. The dude played a little bit with a broken leg, basically, and then also came back from a broken leg
That's
in the same
ridiculous.
season to play games. But this is a weird one, David, because he
Yeah.
brings a lot of above average traits to being a fullback because he's a much better pass catcher than most fullbacks is,
Yeah.
right? That's something you don't see. He's way more athletic than any fullback in the entire league because the dude ranked higher than Derrick Henry on the RAS athletic scale as a running back, which is insane.
Yeah.
He had 9.83 as a fullback. And I've seen him hurdle at least 4 dudes. Like the dude is a freak athlete. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see as much of what he's supposed to be doing a lot of now, which is lead blocking.
Yeah, it doesn't
Kind
have
of
a lot
important for a fullback, you know.
Yeah, a little bit important. Yeah, yeah. What's the comments? It's he has a pro body, and we're gonna figure it out. That's basically
That's
what
what they
Brandon
said.
Staley.
Yeah.
That's what Brandon Staley said about Zander Horvath. Yeah, not a lot of experience here for him as an actual fullback. And I don't know if you really want him carrying the ball because although he was very fun to watch at times, he did have 6 fumbles in 18 games. So that's one of the things that you gotta keep in mind. But I think maybe, just maybe they kind of saw a little Kyle Juszczyk in Zander Horvath, a guy who's a little bit more versatile than most fullbacks that can, maybe will be a little bit of a spark in your offense here and there. A
Sure.
couple of special plays, maybe. But he is definitely going to be a guy that's probably going to have to fight for his life to make this roster. And I mean, that's if they even carry a fullback, because the fullback that they carried last year, Gabe Neighbors, was inactive pretty much the entire season. So he's going to have to come in here and he's going to have to prove that not only is he better fit than Gabe Neighbors, but that he can actually be productive on the football field.
Well, the one counter I would say to that, though, is even though they didn't have Gabe Neighbors active, they used the Gabe Neighbors role. They just gave it to Steven Anderson, right? So that maybe means that the receiving part of it, like a Kyle Juszczyk, right, is a bigger deal for that. But you still have to be able to do the traditional things that you need out of a fullback, or you'll end up as a reserve like Gabe Neighbors was. But Gabe Neighbors is obviously his biggest competition. As a pure runner, even though he hurdles a bunch of dudes, he has a fumble issue and he just runs super straight up.
Yeah.
But the dude's freaky fast, has like pretty good lateral agility as well, at least testing wise. He tested at elite there somehow. I don't really know, but he is a dude that's going to be very easy to root for during training camp, and an athletic freak where, you just want to take him late in the draft just to
I want to
see
see what he's going to do in
make it
preseason
work
games,
out.
man. I want to see what he's going to do in
For
preseason
sure,
games.
man. Like I think is going to be a big time, preseason darling. We'll see how involved he is, right? Because how much is the fullback going to play? But the one thing is in Joe Lombardi's case, especially later on in like the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era, we're using a fullback. And the other thing is Shane Day comes from San Francisco, where they use Kyle Juszczyk that way. And we've seen them use Steven Anderson last year, who came a long way and ended up being a pretty important part of the offense in his own little kind of niche way. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. We all can't wait to see what the rookies are able to do, especially because some of them could have some pretty big responsibilities. But overall, you're not hopefully relying on rookies nearly as much as the Chargers were in 2021. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. But thank you guys for checking out today's show. Thank you for obviously being so understanding about me having to miss a little bit more time than normal just with the wedding and everything else going on right now. Very much appreciated. But to make sure that you don't miss the next one, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever. We are going to have much, much more training camp content for you guys this week. We're going to get into our undrafted free agents we think have the best shot to make the roster. Running back could be a part of that conversation as well. And we're also just going to be getting into the biggest training camp battles because training camp is next week and David's going to be there day one on July 27th when it's open to the public. We are very, very excited about that. So make sure you get all of our content on it. Make sure you're following us in all the right places, and you can follow us on all of our social media because we post it there every day too. Follow me at Dan Talk Sports on Twitter and David Droegemeier at Dro Talk SD. His DMs aren't always open. You can find the show's Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can call into the Locked On Chargers voicemail line at 323-524-7924. You can also find us on our at Locked On Chargers Instagram and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But we will be back with you guys tomorrow and for the rest of the week. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.